The stars are endless tonight, and I have a story for you. My name is Wayfarer. I've drifted through 36,963 galaxies across 3 millennia, seen civilizations rise and fall, collected countless stories along the way. Tonight, I tell you one of them, a tale not of conquest, but of compassion, of a medic who saw only wounds, not enemies, of an empire that valued honor above all else, and of a bond forged in blood and fire that would bridge 2 species across 14 star systems. So sit back, traveler. The journey is about to begin. This is Wayfarer HFY. The battlefield smelled like iron, smoke, and mud churned to paste by heavy artillery until it could barely be called ground. Sergeant Marcus Ashford moved through the carnage with mechanical efficiency, his medic's bag growing lighter with each stop, depleting supplies on soldiers who probably wouldn't survive evacuation, but deserved the attempt anyway. Terthos III was a miserable rock only worth fighting over, because both sides had already invested too much to back down. The temporary ceasefire to retrieve wounded was supposed to last 2 hours. Marcus had 90 minutes left and approximately 40 soldiers still needing triage. He was working his way through a collapsed defensive position when he heard it. Shallow breathing beneath rubble that had been a fortified bunker before artillery disagreed with its architectural integrity. Most of the structure had come down hard enough to guarantee anyone underneath wasn't getting up, but the breathing suggested otherwise. Marcus started moving debris. Combat engineers would have proper equipment for this. He had his hands, a collapsible pry bar, and diminishing optimism. After 20 minutes of work that left his shoulders screaming, he uncovered enough space to reach the survivor, a Skarathi female based on what he could see. Badly injured, deep lacerations across her torso bleeding sluggishly, one arm bent at an angle that definitely wasn't regulation, and probably internal injuries based on the breathing pattern. She was conscious, though, silver eyes tracking his movement as he assessed her condition. Most medics would move on. Enemy combatants received treatment after your own wounded if resources permitted. Marcus had never been particularly good at that calculation. "Easy," he said, shifting into the calm, professional tone that kept frightened soldiers from panicking. "I know you can't understand me, but I'm a medic. I'm going to help. Try not to move." She said something in Skarathi, harsh syllables that might have been protest or question or just pain vocalized. Her metallic skin patterns were flickering erratically, bronze and silver in colors that suggested her biology was struggling. Marcus ignored her words and started treatment. Field dressing for the lacerations, stabilization for the broken arm, injection of broad-spectrum pain medication that should work on Skarathi physiology based on the xenobiology briefings he'd actually read. His hands worked with practiced efficiency while he maintained steady commentary. "That's the worst of the bleeding controlled. Arm's going to hurt, but it's stabilized. You've probably got some internal injuries I can't address in the field, so we're getting you on a transport to actual medical facilities. Just breathe slowly. You're doing great." Well, great is relative when you're under a collapsed bunker, but you're still breathing, and that's the important part. Her metallic patterns shifted to colors he couldn't interpret, but she stopped, trying to speak and let him work. When he was satisfied she was stable enough for transport, he keyed his comm. "Ashford to dispatch. I need medical evac at my position. 1 wounded requiring hospital treatment." "Copy, Ashford. Friendly or hostile? Hostile. Skarathi. Female. Significant trauma, but stable. There was a pause. Ashford, resources are limited. Prioritize friendly wounded. I am prioritizing. She's critical and stable. That makes her next on the list. She's enemy combatant, Sergeant. She's wounded, and I'm a medic. That's how this works. Evac transport, please. I've got 40 more casualties to assess. Another pause. Then resignation. Copy. Transport inbound, 8 minutes. Marcus returned to his patient. She was watching him with those metallic silver eyes, her skin pattern still flickering through colors he didn't have context to understand. When he checked her pulse, Skarathi physiology was similar enough to human that basic vital signs worked the same way. She caught his wrist with her uninjured hand, stronger grip than he expected given her injuries. "You," she said in accented but understandable English, "shielded me. Why?" Marcus blinked. "Because you needed help. Try not to move that arm. The stabilization isn't perfect. You human, I enemy. You're wounded. That comes first." He gently extracted his wrist from her grip. "Transport's coming. They'll get you proper treatment." She stared at him like he'd said something profound instead of just doing his job. Her metallic patterns shifted to colors that looked almost like awe or reverence, though that seemed unlikely given the circumstances. The transport arrived, a battered atmospheric shuttle repurposed for casualty evacuation. They loaded her onto the stretcher, Marcus providing handoff briefing to the flight medics about her injuries and treatment administered. As they were securing her for transport, she grabbed his wrist again. "Your face," she said. Her English was getting clearer despite the pain medication affecting her system. "I remember." "Try not to talk. Save your strength." "I remember," she repeated, then was loaded into the transport and gone. Marcus moved on to the next casualty. There were always more wounded, never enough medics, and ceasefire periods that ended whether you were finished or not. He triaged, treated, and evacuated for another 70 minutes, until the ceasefire expired and both sides returned to the productive work of trying to kill each other. He didn't think about the Skarathi woman again for 3 days. There was too much immediate crisis to spare mental energy on patients who'd been successfully evacuated. Then Skarathi forces requested formal ceasefire for diplomatic negotiations, and everything changed. The Skarathi delegation arrived with ceremony that seemed excessive for military negotiations. Elaborate honor guard, formal regalia, the kind of pageantry that suggested this was more than standard tactical discussion. Marcus watched from a distance because medics weren't included in diplomatic proceedings unless someone needed emergency medical care. Then he saw her, center of the honor guard, wearing regalia that made absolutely clear she wasn't just any wounded soldier. The Skarathi woman he'd pulled from rubble and treated like any other casualty was standing there with authority that bent space around her, flanked by guards who looked ready to kill anyone who breathed wrong. Empress Seraphine, Supreme Commander of the Skarathi military, ruler of an empire spanning 14 systems, the galaxy's most feared warrior according to intelligence briefings. Definitely not just another wounded soldier. Marcus felt his stomach drop somewhere around his knees. He was summoned to Colonel Hartman's office within the hour. The colonel looked like he'd been hit by something heavy and was still processing the impact. "Sergeant Ashford," Hartman said with a kind of forced calm that preceded explosions. "Sit down. We need to discuss what you did 3 days ago." "I treated wounded during the ceasefire, sir." "You treated the Skarathi Empress with your own hands. Do you understand what that means in their culture?" "I treated a wounded soldier. I didn't know she was the Empress." "She was traveling incognito to assess battlefield conditions personally. Got caught in our artillery bombardment. Ended up in that rubble." Hartman pulled up files on his display. "According to Skarathi custom, when you directly treated her wounds, placed your hands on her injuries, spoke words of comfort, called for her evacuation, you invoked something called the right of blood." "The what?" "Ancient Skarathi tradition. Direct personal care of royalty by someone not designated as their official healer is interpreted as claiming consort bond and accepting responsibility for their protection. You're now legally bound to her under Skarathi law unless you formally renounce." Marcus stared at him. "I'm a combat medic. I treated her exactly like I'd treat any wounded soldier. How is that claiming consort bond?" "Because in their culture, royalty doesn't receive care from random soldiers. They have designated healers. When you treated her personally, spoke to her directly, ensured her evacuation, those actions constitute blood bond declaration." Hartman looked exhausted. "You need to formally renounce this bond, Ashford, immediately." "Fine, I'll explain. It was a misunderstanding. It's not that simple. Renunciation requires you to publicly declare that your actions were taken with ulterior motives, incompetence, or deception. You'd have to claim you either knew who she was and treated her for political gain, that you're incompetent as a medic, or that you lied about your intentions. Those are all false. I know. But Skarathi law requires the renunciation to include one of those claims, any of which makes us look terrible. Either our medics are politically manipulative, incompetent, or dishonest." Before Marcus could process that nightmare scenario, communications arrived. Empress Seraphine requested private audience with Sergeant Marcus Ashford to discuss the right of blood. The diplomatic chamber was more austere than he expected for an empress. Seraphine waited with minimal guard presence, her metallic skin currently displaying deep bronze tones he couldn't interpret. She was taller than she'd seemed while buried in rubble. Skarathis averaged a handspan more height than humans, and she carried herself with authority that made the space feel smaller. "Sergeant Ashford," she said. Her English was flawless now, none of the painful hesitation from the battlefield. "You saved my life when you had no obligation. You tended my wounds with care despite our people's being at war. In doing so, you invoked the right of blood. Your Majesty, I didn't know who you were. I treated you the same way I treat any wounded soldier. I understand, but your knowledge of my identity is irrelevant to our law. You placed your hands upon my injuries. You spoke words of comfort and reassurance. You ensured my evacuation to safety. These constitute blood bond by our oldest traditions. I'm a medic. That's just standard medical care. For humans, perhaps. For Skarathis, direct personal care of royalty carries specific meaning." Her metallic patterns shifted slightly. "You may renounce the bond, but doing so requires public declaration that your actions were motivated by political calculation, were performed incompetently, or involved deception about your intentions. I do not believe any of those are true." Marcus sat down without being invited, because standing was becoming difficult. "So my options are, claim I'm manipulative, incompetent, or a liar, or accept a bond I never intended to create? There is a third option. Undergo the trials of blood. If you complete them, the bond is validated and you gain legal standing as my blood consort. If you fail, the bond dissolves without requiring renunciation. Trials designed for Skarathi warriors. I'm a human medic with no combat specialty. Yes, your chances of success are minimal. Her tone was matter-of-fact rather than insulting. But honorable failure preserves dignity for both our peoples. It demonstrates you respect our culture enough to attempt our traditions even when success is unlikely. But what happens if I refuse both options? Then the bond remains in legal uncertainty indefinitely. Neither our government nor yours can tolerate that ambiguity during peace negotiations. You would face restrictions without rights, creating ongoing diplomatic complications. Marcus looked at her directly. You're the Empress. Can't you just waive this requirement? Skarathi law binds me as much as anyone, more perhaps, because my actions carry symbolic weight. Her metallic pattern shifted to colors that might have been sympathy. I wish I could offer you simpler choices, but I cannot unmake law to spare you inconvenience. Over the following days, pressure mounted from every direction. Human command wanted immediate renunciation. They couldn't afford a low-ranking medic entangled with Skarathi royalty during delicate negotiations. But military lawyers explained that renunciation would validate Skarathi suspicions that humans didn't genuinely respect their cultural practices. Skarathi court factions were equally divided. Traditionalists were scandalized that a human medic had invoked blood bond with their empress. Reformists saw it as opportunity to demonstrate cooperation. Both agreed Marcus would probably fail the trials, but differed on whether his failure would be politically useful or embarrassing. Through all this, Empress Seraphine made an unexpected offer. She would personally sponsor Marcus's trial preparation, as was her right under Skarathi law. Not because she expected success, but because she believed he'd acted with genuine honor and deserved to fail with dignity rather than being pressured into renunciation. Marcus, trapped between terrible options and unwilling to publicly claim incompetence or deception, accepted. I'll attempt your trials, he told her during their next meeting, but I'm doing this to avoid diplomatic incident, not because I think I can actually pass. Understood. Her metallic pattern settled into warm bronze tones. We begin preparation tomorrow. The trials test 4 domains: combat prowess, tactical acuity, loyalty, and sacrifice. Each is designed to prove you can protect the one you've blood bonded. I'm a medic. My combat training is defensive. Then we emphasize what humans do well and work around what you cannot match. She almost smiled. You kept me alive in a collapsed bunker using field supplies and determination. That suggests resourcefulness. We'll build on that. Marcus was transferred from combat duty to a Skarathi diplomatic compound. His new quarters were more luxurious than anything in his military experience and completely unnecessary for someone about to fail alien trials publicly. But at least he'd fail with honor, instead of lying about why he'd helped someone who needed medical care that he could live with. Training began the next morning in facilities designed for Skarathi warriors who'd spent years preparing for trials. Marcus had weeks to master. The combat training grounds were intimidating. Multiple environments, weapons ranging from traditional blades to advanced energy systems. automated opponents that could adapt to fighting styles in real time. Empress Seraphine met him there wearing training armor that was somehow more intimidating than her formal regalia. Her metallic skin patterns were displaying focused, silver-gray tones. "We start with assessment," she said. "Show me what you can do." Marcus went through basic human combat training, defensive maneuvers, disarming techniques, the kind of close-quarters combat medics learned for self-protection in hostile zones. It was competent, but unremarkable, and probably looked pathetic compared to Skarathi martial traditions. Seraphine watched with focused attention. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "Your technique emphasizes defense and evasion rather than offense. That's appropriate for your role as medic." "It's also all I know, Your Majesty." "Stop calling me that during training. It's inefficient." She moved to the weapons rack. "And you know more than you think. Your movements are economical. You don't waste energy on unnecessary flourishes. That's valuable in extended combat. Skarathis are stronger than humans. I can't match you in direct confrontation." "Then we don't fight direct confrontations. The combat prowess trial tests your ability to defend me, not defeat superior opponents through brute force." She selected a training blade. "Show me how you'd protect someone injured who couldn't defend themselves." They spent hours drilling defensive scenarios. Marcus learned that Skarathi combat doctrine emphasized honor and direct engagement. They considered evasive tactics somewhat distasteful, but the blood bond trials were different. They tested protection, not glory. Human endurance is superior to Skarathi in extended engagements, Seraphine explained during a break. "We're stronger in short bursts, but you can maintain defensive perimeter longer. That's exploitable." "You're helping me find advantages against your own species." "I'm preparing you for trials that test worthiness to blood bond. If you fail because I inadequately prepared you, that reflects poorly on both of us." Her metallic patterns flickered briefly warmer. "Also, I find your determination interesting. You didn't want this bond, but you're approaching preparation with genuine commitment. Because doing something badly when I've agreed to do it at all seems worse than just refusing. That philosophy is rarer than you'd think." Over the following weeks, an unexpected partnership developed. Seraphine was demanding but fair, pushing Marcus to his limits while acknowledging when those limits were biological rather than willingness-based. Marcus discovered she was brilliant tactically. Centuries of experience combined with constant innovation rather than relying on traditional approaches. They trained together daily. Combat scenarios, tactical simulations, cultural education about Skarathi honor codes, and blood bond responsibilities. Marcus absorbed information with the same focused intensity he'd applied to medical training, treating trial preparation like learning a complex surgical procedure. During evening sessions, Seraphine asked questions about human medical philosophy that seemed unrelated to trials. "When you found me in that rubble, you spoke constantly while treating my wounds. Why?" "Frightened patients are harder to treat. Talking keeps them calm, gives them something to focus on besides injury. You treated me as a person experiencing fear rather than an enemy experiencing defeat. You were wounded. That made you a patient first. Everything else was secondary." Her metallic patterns shifted to deep bronze. "That perspective is unusual among warriors. We're trained to see enemies as obstacles to eliminate, not individuals requiring care. But I'm a medic. Our training emphasizes that wounded are wounded regardless of who they fight for. Obviously, we prioritize our own forces in triage, but the fundamental obligation is to preserve life where possible. Even when that life belongs to someone trying to kill your comrades. Even then, once they're wounded, they're not fighting anymore. They're just hurt. Marcus paused. I know that sounds naive to career soldiers, but if we start picking who deserves medical care based on which side they fight for, we lose something important. You lose tactical efficiency. We lose humanity. There's a difference. Seraphine was silent for a long moment. When I understood that a human had invoked blood bond with me, I expected political calculation or misguided romance. But you genuinely just helped because someone needed help. That's rare. It's basic decency. In theory. In practice, basic decency is often the first casualty of war. 3 weeks into preparation, the assassination attempts began. Marcus was in his quarters reviewing tactical scenarios when his evening meal arrived. Standard diplomatic compound cuisine delivered by regular staff. He was 3 bites into the meal when nausea hit like a physical blow, followed by vertigo and the kind of full-body wrongness that suggested poison. He triggered emergency medical alert and forced himself to vomit. Combat medic training included recognizing poisoning symptoms and immediate countermeasures. By the time Skarathi medical personnel arrived, he'd purged most of the contaminated food and was conscious enough to describe symptoms. The analysis was conclusive. Myrithx poison, lethal to humans in the dosage administered. The only reason Marcus survived was recognizing symptoms immediately and purging before full absorption. The poison was sophisticated enough that standard food safety screening had missed it. Investigation revealed the attempt had been coordinated. Someone with access to diplomatic compound kitchens had introduced the poison during meal preparation. Security footage had been conveniently corrupted for the relevant time period. Empress Seraphine's response was immediate and furious. Her metallic skin patterns went dark crimson, a color Marcus had learned indicated rage barely contained by discipline. You will be moved to secure royal facilities immediately, she informed him, her voice controlled but carrying edge sharp enough to cut. My personal guard will provide protection. This cannot happen again. Your Majesty, Seraphine, we agreed on efficiency during training. She pulled up security reports. Someone wants you dead before trials can validate the blood bond. They're coordinating across species lines. The poison was Skarathi military grade, but access required human intelligence about your schedule and preferences. So both our governments have factions opposing this. Yes, Skarathi traditionalists who don't want human blood bonded to their empress, and human supremacists who oppose deeper integration with alien cultures. Both benefit from your death. Marcus was relocated to the most secure section of the royal compound, surrounded by guards who'd personally sworn loyalty to Empress Seraphine. His training continued, but now every piece of equipment was inspected, every environment scanned, every interaction monitored. The second assassination attempt came during outdoor combat training. Marcus was running defensive scenarios when a shot cracked across the training ground. Not from the designated opponents, from a concealed position outside the facility perimeter. The shot missed Marcus by inches and killed a Skarathi guard who'd been standing 3 meters away. Absolute precision marksmanship from extreme range, only failing to kill Marcus because he'd stumbled on uneven ground at the exact wrong moment. The shooter was never found. Investigation suggested off-world, professional, with access to military-grade weapons and detailed intelligence about training schedules. "They're escalating," Seraphine said during the emergency security review. Her metallic patterns were cycling through dark colors that suggested fury and concern fighting for dominance. "These aren't random attempts. This is coordinated campaign with significant resources." "Maybe I should withdraw from the trials," Marcus suggested, "if completing them creates this much danger." Withdrawal now validates their tactics. It tells every faction opposing cooperation that violence works. Her voice was steel. "We continue, but we accelerate the schedule. The trials begin in 1 week rather than 3. Give them less time to coordinate." The accelerated timeline meant intensive preparation compressed into days. Marcus trained until exhaustion became his default state, drilling combat scenarios, studying tactical theory, memorizing Skarathi honor codes that would govern trial conduct. Through it all, Seraphine was relentless but supportive. She pushed him past limits he thought he had while acknowledging when biology made certain techniques impossible for human physiology. "You're improving faster than I anticipated," she admitted during a rare break. "Your defensive instincts are becoming genuine rather than trained responses. I'm motivated. People are trying to kill me. That focuses attention remarkably." "Yes, but you're also—" She paused, her metallic patterns shifting through contemplative colors. "You're treating this like saving a patient's life. Complete focus, efficient movement, no wasted energy on performance. It's effective. That's the only way I know how to approach high-stakes situations." "Then perhaps blood bond trials are not so different from battlefield medicine. Both require protecting life under pressure." Part 6. The trials begin. The combat prowess trial arrived faster than Marcus felt ready for, but preparation time had expired. The trial occurred in the Grand Arena, massive facility that could simulate multiple combat environments and accommodate thousands of spectators. Marcus stood at the center wearing armor that had been modified for human physiology, facing 3 Skarathi champions who'd volunteered to test his defensive capabilities. The crowd was mixed. Skarathi observers curious to see how badly the human would fail. Human diplomatic staff looking resigned to public embarrassment, and various factions probably hoping for fatal accident. The trial began. The first scenario tested defense against direct assault. Marcus faced a Skarathi warrior whose strength was overwhelming by human standards. He couldn't match force with force, but he could evade, redirect, use the opponent's momentum against them while maintaining defensive perimeter around the space where Empress Seraphine would theoretically be positioned. He lost the direct engagement, inevitable, against superior strength. But the judges acknowledged he'd successfully maintained defensive position for the required duration, demonstrating capability to protect despite being physically outmatched. The second scenario introduced weapons. Marcus faced an armed opponent while defending a fixed position. His medical knowledge proved unexpectedly useful. He knew exactly where Skarathi physiology was vulnerable, which strikes would disable without killing, how to maximize defensive efficiency with minimal energy expenditure. He lost again, but demonstrated enough tactical awareness and defensive skill to pass the scenario. The third scenario was environmental. Defend against multiple opponents in hostile terrain with limited visibility. This tested adaptability and sustained defensive capability rather than direct combat prowess. Marcus drew on every bit of combat medic experience, years of operating in hostile environments, maintaining defensive positions while treating wounded, the kind of pressure under fire experience that couldn't be trained in controlled settings. He used terrain advantages, conservative energy management, and human endurance to outlast opponents who were individually superior, but who fatigued faster in extended engagement. The scenario ended with Marcus still maintaining defensive perimeter, despite exhaustion, minor injuries, and 3 Skarathi warriors who'd been forced to acknowledge that the human was more resilient than anticipated. The judges deliberated for 30 minutes. Finally, the announcement came. Passage. Not with exceptional marks, but with sufficient demonstration of defensive capability to proceed to the next trial. The arena erupted in mixed reactions. Skarathi observers seemed surprised. Human diplomatic staff looked relieved. Empress Seraphine's metallic patterns were displaying warm bronze tones that suggested approval or perhaps pride. Marcus collapsed in the recovery area, every muscle screaming protest. He'd passed, 1 trial down, 3 to go. And people were still trying to kill him, which meant the next trials would be even more dangerous. Part 7. Acuity and Loyalty. The tactical acuity trial was scheduled for 3 days later, barely enough time for Marcus to recover from combat prowess before facing the next challenge. This trial tested strategic thinking and threat assessment, his ability to anticipate danger and protect Empress Seraphine through planning rather than direct combat. He was brought to a simulation chamber where complex security scenarios would be presented. His task was to analyze situations, identify vulnerabilities, and develop protection strategies. The scenarios would escalate in complexity, testing how well he could think tactically under pressure. Empress Seraphine provided final preparation the night before. They reviewed threat assessment frameworks and Skarathi political dynamics that might inform attack strategies. "Remember," she said, "this trial tests your ability to think like someone trying to harm me. You must anticipate threats I wouldn't necessarily see myself, because you're focused on combat threats rather than subtle vulnerabilities." Exactly. Your medical training gives you different perspective. You understand vulnerability in ways warriors don't always consider. The trial began with relatively straightforward scenarios, identifying security weaknesses in diplomatic facilities, assessing crowd threats during public appearances, evaluating personnel for potential compromise. Marcus approached each scenario methodically, applying the same triage thinking he used in medical emergencies. Identify critical threats, prioritize responses, allocate resources efficiently. He passed the initial scenarios without difficulty. Then the complexity escalated. The trial presented a scenario where Empress Seraphine was scheduled to attend a diplomatic summit with multiple faction leaders, some openly hostile. Marcus had to develop comprehensive security strategy, accounting for political assassination, factional violence, and coordinated attacks across multiple vectors. His medical background proved crucial. He understood biological vulnerabilities, which poisons could be introduced, how medical emergencies could be staged to create chaos, where hidden health compromises might make Seraphine vulnerable to otherwise survivable attacks. He identified threats that pure military thinking would miss because they required understanding physiology alongside tactics. The judges watched as he systematically worked through scenarios that had defeated previous trial candidates. His approach was unconventional. He treated threat assessment like diagnosing complex medical conditions, looking for patterns and vulnerabilities others might overlook. The final scenario was the most complex: a coordinated coup attempt during a state ceremony with threats coming from multiple directions simultaneously. Marcus had to prioritize which threats to address first, how to protect Seraphine while maintaining stability, where to allocate defensive resources for maximum effectiveness. He completed the scenario successfully by recognizing that the most dangerous threat wasn't the obvious military assault, but the subtle medical emergency being staged to draw security away from Seraphine's position. His medical training let him identify the staged emergency, while military-focused candidates would have been fooled. Passage. The judges acknowledged his unconventional approach demonstrated valuable perspective on protection that complemented traditional security thinking. 2 trials passed, 2 remaining. The loyalty trial was more psychological than physical. Marcus was brought to an interrogation facility where he would undergo intensive questioning, designed to reveal whether his blood bond claim was genuine or motivated by ulterior purposes. The interrogators were skilled Skarathi intelligence specialists trained to identify deception and extract truth from resistant subjects. They had access to every detail of Marcus's background, his service record, his actions before and after encountering Empress Seraphine. The questioning lasted 12 hours. They probed his motivations, his political beliefs, his relationships with other humans and Skarathis. They presented scenarios designed to reveal hidden allegiances or calculated manipulation. But Marcus had nothing to hide. He treated a wounded soldier because that's what medics do. He'd accepted blood bond trials because all his alternatives were worse. He had no political agenda, no hidden loyalties, no calculated plan beyond trying to survive an impossible situation with some dignity intact. His complete lack of ulterior motive was so obvious it became its own proof. The interrogators found no deception because there was no deception to find. Every answer was straightforward, every motivation transparent, every decision explicable through the simple logic of doing his job and trying to minimize diplomatic complications. The final interrogator, a senior Skarathi intelligence officer whose metallic pattern stayed neutral gray throughout, looked almost disappointed. "You genuinely just helped because someone was wounded." The officer said it wasn't quite a question. Yes. No political calculation, no strategic thinking, no awareness of who she was. Correct. That's either remarkably stupid or remarkably principled. Can it be both? The officer's metallic patterns flickered briefly toward colors that might have been amusement. Passage. Your loyalty to the blood bond is genuine because it's based on principle rather than calculation. That's unusual but valid. 3 trials passed. 1 remained. Part 8. Sacrifice and Coup. The sacrifice trial was scheduled for 5 days later. Marcus spent that time in intensive preparation for what everyone acknowledged was the most dangerous trial, the one where he would face scenarios requiring him to choose between his own safety and Empress Seraphine's protection. But intelligence intercepted communications that changed everything. The conspiracy had been planning their final move. During the sacrifice trial, weapon systems would malfunction in ways designed to kill both Marcus and Empress Seraphine. The assassination would be blamed on trial safety failures, eliminating both the human-threatening traditionalist power structures and the Empress who'd been pushing for deeper cooperation. The plot was sophisticated and involved personnel at the highest levels. Skarathi military officers aligned with traditionalist factions and human supremacist operatives who'd infiltrated diplomatic security. Both groups had been coordinating for weeks, using the trial schedule as cover for positioning assets. Empress Seraphine's response was to accelerate the sacrifice trial immediately before conspirators could fully prepare, and to conduct it not as controlled simulation, but as live combat exercise against actual threats. "They want to kill us during the trial," she explained to Marcus. "We're making the trial about surviving their attempt. If you can protect me through real combat rather than simulation, you'll have passed more conclusively than any controlled scenario could demonstrate." That's insane. Yes, but we're out of time for sane options. Her metallic patterns were displaying the dark crimson of controlled fury. "My security forces are moving to arrest identified conspirators, but we've underestimated how deep this runs. Arrests may trigger the coup attempt early rather than preventing it." She was right. Within hours of the first arrests, Skarathi military units aligned with traditionalist factions launched coordinated attacks on royal facilities. Simultaneously, human supremacist forces struck diplomatic compounds attempting to destabilize peace negotiations. The carefully planned sacrifice trial dissolved into actual warfare. Marcus found himself in the middle of a coup attempt, armed with combat training measured in weeks against forces with centuries of experience. But he had one advantage: Empress Seraphine beside him, and she was genuinely the galaxy's most feared warrior for very good reasons. They fought together through facilities under siege. Marcus provided defensive support, covering vulnerable angles, warning of threats Seraphine's combat focus caused her to miss, using his medical knowledge to keep her fighting through injuries that would have sidelined most warriors. The coup forces had underestimated two critical factors. First, Empress Seraphine hadn't built her reputation through political maneuvering alone. She was devastatingly effective in actual combat, combining centuries of experience with tactical brilliance and physical capabilities that exceeded normal Skarathi standards. Watching her fight was like observing a natural disaster with strategic purpose. Second, Marcus's combat medic training meant he could keep both of them functional under conditions that would overwhelm pure combatants. He treated injuries in the middle of firefights, identified threats through medical understanding of how attacks would manifest, and maintained defensive perimeter while Seraphine eliminated primary threats. They were 3 levels deep into the royal compound, fighting through coup forces attempting to reach the central command facilities when Marcus saw the attack coming. Sniper position. Elevated angle targeting Seraphine while she was engaged with ground forces, the shot would be fatal. Precise targeting of the vulnerable points in Skarathi physiology that Marcus had learned during medical training. He moved without thinking, diving to intercept, putting himself between Seraphine and the incoming fire. The shot hit him in the shoulder, agonizing impact that spun him sideways and dropped him to the floor. Not fatal, but definitely serious. His medical training cataloged the injury automatically. Through and through, missed major arteries. Painful, but survivable if treated promptly. Seraphine eliminated the sniper 3 seconds later with precision that suggested profound anger. Then she was beside Marcus, her metallic pattern cycling through colors he'd never seen. Complex combinations suggesting multiple strong emotions fighting for dominance. "You took that shot from me," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "You were exposed. I had better angle to intercept." Marcus's voice was tight with pain. "Also, I'm the medic. I can treat my own injury. Can't treat myself if you're dead." That's not how blood bond protection is supposed to work. I'm improvising. Medical school didn't cover alien warrior protection protocols. Despite the pain and ongoing combat, Seraphine's metallic patterns flickered briefly toward colors that looked like affection or profound respect. "You just completed the sacrifice trial. Taking injury meant for me prioritizing my survival over your own safety. That's textbook. Blood bond demonstration. Great. Can we celebrate after we're not being shot at?" Loyal Skarathi forces arrived within minutes, reinforced by human military units that had remained committed to peace negotiations. The coup was suppressed with efficiency, suggesting it had been poorly coordinated despite extensive planning. Conspirators were captured or neutralized. The attempt failed not because of superior numbers, but because the people trying to kill Empress Seraphine had fundamentally underestimated both her combat capability and the determination of forces supporting cooperation. Marcus was treated in a secure medical facility, his shoulder injury requiring surgery, but not life-threatening. He woke from anesthesia to find Empress Seraphine waiting in his recovery room, her metallic patterns displaying warm bronze tones. "The sacrifice trial," she said without preamble. "You completed it, not in controlled simulation, but under genuine combat conditions that tested authentic commitment. You took serious injury to protect me. You prioritized my survival above your own safety. By any standard of Skarathi law, you've passed. I'm a medic. Keeping people alive is what I do. You consistently reduce profound actions to simple duty." Her metallic patterns flickered with what might have been amusement. "It's remarkably humble or remarkably stubborn." "Definitely stubborn. It's one of my defining characteristics." "So I've learned?" She pulled up official documentation. All 4 trials completed. Combat prowess, tactical acuity, loyalty, and sacrifice. You've demonstrated capability to blood bond by our culture's highest standards. The bond stands. I'm formally accepting your blood consort status under Skarathi law. I'm a sergeant, a combat medic. This is objectively insane. Yes, but you've earned this through authentic demonstration of the qualities we value. Genuine care without calculation, tactical competence under pressure, loyalty without ulterior motive, and willingness to sacrifice for others. Those qualities transcend rank or species. Part 9. New Equilibrium. The formal acceptance ceremony occurred 2 weeks later, after Marcus had recovered sufficiently and after both governments had processed the coup attempt's implications. The ceremony was simpler than traditional Skarathi royal proceedings. Seraphine explained this was deliberate, honoring the straightforward battlefield care that had initiated the bond. Representatives from both species attended. Not everyone was comfortable. Traditionalists remained opposed. Some human personnel thought Marcus had exceeded appropriate boundaries, but the coup attempt had clarified stakes. The conspiracy represented existential threat to peace. Marcus and Seraphine's partnership, formed through simple medical care and tested through actual combat, demonstrated that cooperation could survive extreme pressure. When asked to speak, Marcus kept it brief. I treated Empress Seraphine because she was wounded. I didn't know her identity, and it wouldn't have mattered if I had. Medics serve wounded regardless of who they are or which side they fight for. That's the fundamental obligation. If this partnership helps prevent future conflicts by demonstrating our peoples can form genuine bonds despite differences, then I'm honored to serve. But I'm still a medic first. That's what this represents to me, choosing to heal rather than harm. Seraphine spoke with the authority of someone commanding 14 systems. Blood Consort Ashford saw me at my most vulnerable and responded with care rather than exploitation. His actions reminded both our peoples that true strength includes knowing when to help rather than fight. His presence represents our commitment to cooperation through genuine respect, not merely avoiding conflict. I'm honored to accept his blood bond and defend the partnership we've built through fire. The ceremony concluded with formal recognition from both governments, not universal approval. Some factions remained opposed, but enough acknowledgement that refusing to recognize the bond would align officials with the failed coup conspirators. 6 months later, Marcus had settled into his new reality with the same pragmatic acceptance he'd applied to every other impossible situation. He still served as combat medic, now coordinating emergency medical protocols between human and Skarathi forces. He attended diplomatic functions as blood consort, providing human perspective on policies affecting both species. His relationship with Empress Seraphine evolved into genuine partnership. Not romantic in traditional human sense, they came from two fundamentally different contexts, but functional and built on mutual respect. They worked well together because Marcus never wanted power, and Seraphine valued competence over performance. "You're still terrible at formal court protocols," she observed during one reception. "I know trauma surgery. Court protocols are someone else's specialty. And yet you navigate them adequately through simply being genuine. People are too confused by a human medic at an empress's side to expect traditional behavior." Her metallic patterns displayed warm amusement colors. Possibly. They reviewed medical cooperation initiatives that were saving lives across both militaries. Protocols Marcus had helped develop, combining human and Skarathi medical knowledge. The work was unglamorous, but meaningful. News arrived. Formal peace treaty signed on Terthos III. The war that had brought them together was officially ending, partly because the coup attempt had demonstrated that continued conflict served conspirators more than either species' genuine interests. "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked that day. "When I found you in the rubble?" Seraphine's metallic pattern shifted through contemplative colors. "I regret being caught in artillery bombardment. I don't regret that you found me. Your choice to help demonstrated values both our peoples claim but don't always practice. That was worth the complications. Even the assassination attempts and coup? Especially those. They revealed threats we wouldn't have identified otherwise. Your presence forced both governments to confront whether our cooperation was genuine or merely convenient rhetoric." She paused, her metallic pattern shifting to warm bronze. "Also, Your medical protocols have saved thousands of lives. That alone justifies everything. I'm just doing my job. You consistently reduce significant impact to simple duty. It remains remarkable. Outside, ships from both species move through coordinated patrols. Joint operations that would have been impossible before one combat medic treated wounded without checking faction affiliation first. Not perfect, not without tension, but better. And Marcus Ashford, who'd become blood consort to the galaxy's most feared warrior through the simple act of caring for wounded, continued doing what he'd always done, keeping people alive and trying to make situations better rather than worse. Just with more diplomatic oversight than before. Some partnerships he'd learned you couldn't plan for. But with shared values and commitment to genuine cooperation over comfortable isolation, you could build something meaningful, even if it started in a collapsed bunker on a miserable battlefield, treating injuries without knowing who you were helping. Especially then, that's where the account ends. The transmission was dated 6 years ago, right before the formal peace treaty was ratified on Terthos III. I did some digging after receiving this. Public records show Marcus Ashford is alive. Currently serves as Chief Medical Coordinator for Joint Human Skarathi Operations. Title: Blood Consort to Empress Seraphine. Honorary rank in both militaries. The first human ever to hold that position. And Seraphine? She's still Empress. 23 years into her reign now. One of the longest-serving Skarathi rulers in recent history. By all accounts, she's transformed her empire. More cooperative, more open to alliance. And she has a human medic who never leaves her side. I found one interview, short, from a medical summit 3 years ago. A reporter asked her, "Your Majesty, you have access to the finest Skarathi healers across 14 systems. Why do you keep a human medic as your blood consort?" She looked directly at the camera and she said, "Because 6 years ago, when I was buried under rubble and everyone had reason to leave me there, a human medic knelt in the mud beside me and refused to move until I was safe. He taught me that true strength is not about conquest or power or empire. It is about who you choose to save when no one is watching. That is why he remains at my side, because I choose to protect the one who protected me first." I've carried many stories across my journey, traveler, tales of war, of glory, of civilizations rising and falling. But this one stays with me because it's not about humanity conquering the stars. It's about something simpler, a medic doing his job, a wound treated, a bond that transcended species, culture, and every political complication standing in the way. Marcus Ashford wasn't special because he was a warrior. He was special because when he saw someone bleeding, he stopped to help. And that is what defines us as human, not our weapons, not our tactics, our refusal to look away from suffering, even when it wears an enemy's face. Seraphine was right, about strength. It's not measured by who you can defeat. It's measured by who you choose to save. I am Wayfarer, and I carry these tales so they are never forgotten. This was the account of Sergeant Marcus Ashford, the combat medic who became a legend by treating a wound without asking which side she fought for. Safe travels, wanderer, and remember, the strongest among us are not those who never fall. They are those who kneel in the rubble and pull others out. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is care. Now, here is your sonic transmission from the binary convergence, sounds captured where two stars orbit as one, bound by gravity older than civilizations. Let the harmony carry you, traveler. May you find your own bond worth protecting,